Imagine peeling a heavy-duty piece of athletic tape off your heel, right? But when you pull it, you realize the adhesive has literally like chemically melted into your raw skin.
Oh, that is just brutal.
Right. And you're standing there in the freezing rain. You've walked 60 miles, which sounds like a lot, but you still have, 2,140 miles left to go.
Just a casual 2,000 miles.
Exactly. You are completely exhausted. Your joints are just screaming at you. And you're starting to legitimately worry that your sudden inability to walk at a normal pace might actually be an early symptom of a neurological disease.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. So why would a successful 61-year-old engineer voluntarily choose to subject himself to this? Like, what actually compels a human being to trade a warm med and a super predictable career for half a year of just systematic physical degradation?
Well, I mean, it's a profound behavioral paradox. We spend our entire lives engineering comfort, right? Building walls to keep the rain out, designing these tight schedules to avoid unpredictability.
Yeah, complete.
Yet there is this subset of the population that actively seeks out the absolute dismantling of all those comforts. And, the documentation we have for today's deep dive into the source material, it offers this incredibly granular day-by-day look at exactly how that dismantling happens.
And what's left over when the comforts are gone.
Exactly. What is left of a person once all those comfortable layers are just stripped away?
So the source material we are cracking open today is the personal 2025 journal of an Appalachian Trail thru hiker. His name is Gregor Woolman. And Gregor is a bridge engineer from Blacksburg, Virginia.
An engineer mindset in the woods, which is always fun.
Oh, it really is. And the Appalachian Trail, or the AT, for short, for anyone who maybe only knows it as a squiggly line on a map, it's a continuous 2,200-mile footpath. It spans 14 states on the eastern seaboard of the U.S.
From Georgia all the way up to Maine.
Right, from Springer Mountain in Georgia to Mount Katahdin in Maine. But the distance isn't really the true metric of the suffering here. It's the elevation. You are looking at roughly 460,000 feet of elevation gain and an equal amount of elevation drop over the course of those miles.
Just to put that specific, topographical violence into perspective for you, that is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest from sea level to the summit 16 times.
16 times. That is insane.
It is. You are not just going for a walk on a flat path through the woods. You're basically engaging in a relentless 6-month stair-stepper exercise, and you're doing it while carrying your entire survival infrastructure on your back.
And, well, Gregor didn't just hike it straight through from Georgia to Maine either. That's normally called a northbound or Henobio hike. But since he lives in Blacksburg, which is, it's situated right near the 1/3 mark of the trail, he opted for what's known as a wraparound hike.
Right, starting the middle.
Yeah, he started near his home at the trailhead for the famous McAfee Knob, walked north, and then eventually flipped back down south to complete the lower portion. So he ends his journey exactly where he started.
Which is a really interesting logistical choice.
It is. But before we get into all the mechanics of navigating the weather and the terrain and everything, let's look at the psychology of the starting line. His pre-trail journal entry from January 10th, 2025 is fascinating.
Yeah, it really sets the tone.
Because it doesn't read like this romantic manifesto about finding himself in nature or whatever. It reads like a corporate diagnostic.
You can't hide the analytical mindset of a bridge engineer. He is sitting down, looking at his life, and he's recognizing this ticking biological clock.
The dreaded midlife realization.
Exactly. He explicitly states his fear of retiring, only to sit around, in his words, moping about the brevity of life. He wants this huge adventure that rivals the sheer audacity of his original immigration to the United States.
But he doesn't just throw caution to the wind.
No, not at all. Instead of just winging it, he builds this emotional risk assessment matrix.
Yes, I loved this part. He literally creates a checklist. He asks himself, what happens if I complete this? And lists out the return on investment.
Like pride, unique memories.
Right, memories that only a tiny fraction of the population will ever understand. A radical shift in perspective. But the way he frames the failure scenario is what really caught my attention. He asks, what happens if I do not complete a thru hike? And his written answer is literally, nothing lost, I am just dabbling.
That is a classic psychological defense mechanism. It's preemptive rationalization.
Protecting himself before he even starts.
Exactly. He is trying to engineer an emotional safety net before he takes a single step. By framing a potential failure as merely, dabbling. He's trying to protect his ego from the statistical reality of the Appalachian Trail.
It's pretty grim, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people who attempt a through hike fail. The attrition rate is massive, so he knows the bridge might collapse, so to speak. And he's trying to convince himself beforehand that he didn't really care about building the bridge in the first place.
It's brilliant, but it's completely fragile. Because once you step onto the dirt, the trail doesn't care about your preemptive rationalization.
The trail really doesn't care about anything.
No, it doesn't. The transition from this romantic ideal of the wilderness to the brutal, immediate physical reality, it happens almost instantly. And to survive that transition, hikers almost universally undergo an identity shift. They adopt a trail name.
The trail name is such a fascinating sociological constant on long-distance trails. I mean, it functions as a necessary alter ego.
Kind of like a superhero identity, but for walking.
Basically, yeah.
Ugh.
When you introduce yourself by a trail name, you are severing ties with your societal status, your profession, your real-world anxieties. You are creating a simplified, highly resilient avatar designed specifically to endure the trauma of the woods.
And Gregor's origin story for his trail name is incredible. It actually predates his through hike entirely.
Oh, this is a great story.
It's so funny. So he was on an overnight hike with a group of students taught by his wife, Karen. He's prepping dinner, one of those freeze-dried backpacker meals where you just pour boiling water into the pouch.
We've all had those.
Right. So he opens the pouch, boils the water, and mistakenly stirs the desiccant packet into his food, thinking it's like a little seasoning packet.
Which is an incredibly common, yet universally terrifying mistake. Those packets are usually filled with silica gel.
Yeah, and they have "do not eat" printed on them in like 12 different languages. And Gregor, the meticulous bridge engineer, just stirs it into his chili mac and eats it.
Let's actually look at the chemistry and the panic associated with that. Silica gel is essentially silicon dioxide. It's a highly porous substance that absorbs moisture incredibly well, which is, why it keeps freeze-dried food from spoiling.
So is it toxic?
Well, from a purely toxicological standpoint, it is chemically inert. It's not poisonous. It won't kill you. But the fear it induces is profound because of those bold, multilingual warnings.
Right, you see skull and crossbones in your head.
Yeah, the primary danger is actually a choking hazard, or if consumed in massive quantities, extreme dehydration or an intestinal blockage. But in the middle of the woods, miles from a hospital, realizing you just ingested a chemical packet designed to absorb water, the psychological dread is immediate.
You're just sitting there waiting for your stomach to dissolve. But Gregor survives. He digests the chili mac, silica gel and all, and wakes up perfectly fine.
A medical marvel.
Truly. So the students, witnessing this sheer display of gastric fortitude, initially dub him Iron Stomach. And then that evolves over the trip to Iron Guts and eventually gets distilled into the perfect, punchy trail name, Gutsy.
Gutsy. It's a great name.
So from here on out, we are tracking the journey of Gutsy, and the universe decides to test that name almost immediately.
Oh, the onset of physical breakdown on a through hike is a shock to the system. You just cannot adequately train for it in a gym. Gutsy's journal in the early days is a catalog of forced adaptations.
Yeah, he notes a whole series of firsts.
All those basic survival milestones.
Exactly. His first resupplied meal, his first time digging a cat hole to use the bathroom, his first dispersed camping experience outside of an established site, his first real rainstorm. Oh, and his first hitchhike into a town.
Which are massive logistical hurdles for a novice.
They really are. You have to learn the specific micro skills of wilderness hygiene, the etiquette of hitchhiking when you smell like a wet dog, the spatial awareness required to just find a flat piece of dirt to pitch a tent.
And he is trying to learn all of this while dealing with a severe acute foot injury right out of the gate.
Yeah, his foot is just wrecked.
The biomechanics of the foot are incredibly complex. And when you suddenly add 30 or 40 pounds of weight to your spine and then ask your feet to absorb the impact of uneven, rocky terrain for 15 miles a day, the micro-traumas accumulate rapidly.
Like shin splints and stuff.
Worse. Tendons inflame, the plantar fascia tightens up, and the friction points inside the shoe become catastrophic.
It sounds awful. He's practically begging the universe in his journal. He writes, "Please, God, make my foot get better. I would so love to keep going with my adventure." And the universe responds with day 6.
Day 6.
This is the incident hiking out of Bryant Ridge Shelter to Thunder Hill Shelter. It's only a 10-mile day, but the environmental conditions turn it into an absolute nightmare.
The triad of danger in the backcountry is cold, wet, and wind. And on day 6, Gutsy faces pouring rain with a forecast of near-freezing temperatures overnight.
I really want to focus on the specific misery of his footwear here because this is where the reality of the trail really sinks its teeth in. His shoes and socks are completely soaked.
Maceration is no joke.
Exactly. When your feet are wet for hours on end, the skin undergoes that process called maceration. It gets soft, white, and incredibly fragile, kind of like when you stay in the bathtub way too long.
And then you subject that fragile skin to the constant repetitive friction of a hiking shoe.
His heels are rubbed entirely raw.
And the worst part is his attempt to mitigate the damage actually compounds it. He uses Leukotape, right?
Yes, the heady-duty stuff.
Right. Leukotape is a highly adhesive athletic tape made with a zinc oxide adhesive. Under normal, dry conditions, it acts as a phenomenal second skin to prevent blisters.
But these are absolutely not normal conditions.
Precisely. When you introduce excessive moisture from the rain, combined with the heat generated by the friction of walking and the constant shear forces acting on his heel, the chemical composition of that zinc oxide adhesive breaks down.
Oh, gross. So what happens?
It stops being a protective layer and turns into a viscous, sticky paste that basically fuses with the macerated raw skin of his heel.
That is horrifying. He describes trying to peel it off, and it just turns into an irretrievable mess. He's peeling tiny strips of this ruined, sticky mass off his bloody heels in the freezing cold.
You can't even put a fresh bandage on.
No, because the skin is covered in this fused adhesive. It's a logistical failure that leads directly to physical agony, which, inevitably triggers a psychological collapse.
The mind and the body are not separate entities on the trail. When the body enters a state of persistent, unresolvable pain, the brain's neurochemistry shifts.
It just tanks.
Dopamine and serotonin levels plummet due to physical exhaustion and stress, leading to what Gutsy describes as a deep funk.
It's his dark night of the soul. There's this deeply vulnerable entry where he feels, in his own words, ravaged by old age. And here is where the paranoia sets in.
The mind starts playing tricks.
Big time. He starts worrying about his bladder function. He realizes he is hiking incredibly slowly. And his brain bypasses the obvious explanation that he is exhausted and carrying a heavy pack over mountains and immediately jumps to the worst-case scenario.
Which is?
He genuinely starts to fear that his slow pace and physical deterioration are early symptoms of Parkinson's disease. He admits flat out that he is not having any fun.
Consider the implications of that paranoia. When we are physically depleted, our amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, becomes hyperactive.
Right, it's sounding the alarm.
Exactly. While at the same time, our prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and rational thought, is suppressed by the fatigue. His brain is frantically searching for a reason why he feels so terrible, and instead of accepting the mundane reality of the hike, it catastrophizes.
Which brings up the million-dollar question for you listening. If you are freezing, your heels are bleeding, you are picking melted adhesive out of your open wounds, and you are having legitimate panic attacks about degenerative neurological diseases, why not just call an Uber at the next road crossing and go home to your warm bed?
It seems like the logical choice.
Right. The pre-trail risk matrix said, nothing lost, I am just dabbling. Why not enact the dabbling clause and quit?
Because the matrix was a lie, and the trail exposes that lie.
Oh.
Gutsy arrives at a profound realization about the true nature of his motivation. It is the lesser of two evils. He realizes that the physical pain he is enduring on the trail is acute, but it is temporary.
While the psychological pain of quitting would be chronic.
Exactly. He writes that if he went home, he'd be sitting there feeling sorry for himself, sinking into a deep depression.
Giving up would be the ultimate confirmation of all his deepest fears. It would prove that he is, in fact, too old. It would prove that the biological clock has struck midnight.
The fear of that existential failure, the fear of irrelevance, becomes vastly heavier than the physical weight of his backpack or the pain of his raw heels.
So he keeps walking.
He keeps walking not out of joy, but out of a desperate need to outrun his own irrelevance.
But I mean, fear is a terrible long-term fuel. You can hike on fear for a week, maybe two. You cannot hike 2,200 miles fueled purely by the terror of a midlife crisis.
The engine will burn out.
Exactly. Something fundamental has to shift in his operating system.
And we see that shift clearly documented. He realizes that the problem isn't the weather, and it isn't even his raw heels. The core issue is his relationship with time and his relationship with the people around him.
Right, he has an epiphany.
A huge one. It completely redefines his journey. He stops viewing the trail as a physical distance to be conquered within a specific time frame and starts viewing it as a state of being. He writes, "This is about being in the forest, living in the forest, in this timeless existence."
I really want to dig into that phrase, timeless existence, because it completely contradicts the reason he started.
Completely.
He started because he was acutely aware of his biological clock ticking. He was obsessed with the passing of time, and the trail forces him to strip the clock off his wrist, metaphorically speaking.
It requires a complete deprogramming of the modern industrial mindset. In our daily lives, our value is constantly measured by efficiency. How fast can you complete a task? How quickly can you move from point A to point B?
And Gutsy brings that toxic efficiency metric onto the trail with him at first.
Yes, he is constantly comparing his pace to younger, faster hikers. And as the old saying goes, comparison is the thief of joy.
It's worse than just stealing joy, honestly. On the trail, comparison can literally cause injuries. If you try to match the pace of a 22-year-old college athlete when you are a 61-year-old engineer with a raw heel, you will break your own body.
He'll be off the trail in a week.
Exactly. But the moment Gutsy lets go of the ego associated with speed, the moment he embraces the timeless existence, a switch flips. His entire perception of the environment changes.
When you remove the stress of comparison, your sensory bandwidth opens up. You stop staring at your boots and start actually looking at the forest.
And he starts finding this immense, almost childlike joy in the mundane details of survival. Things that would absolutely infuriate a normal person become these beautiful little logistical victories.
Like the blowdowns.
Yes.
Yeah.
For instance, he marvels at the blowdowns in Georgia.
Let's clarify what a blowdown is for the listener and why it's so physically taxing. A blowdown is a fallen tree that blocks the trail.
It's basically nature's hurdle.
Right. You either have to climb over it, which requires hoisting a heavy pack over rough bark, or you have to crawl under it, which requires deep squats and terrible spinal contortions while carrying all that weight.
It breaks your rhythm completely. But Gutsy notes how, quote, gentle the blowdowns are compared to what he expected. He's finding gratitude in a fallen tree.
It's a massive shift in perspective.
It is. And then there is the choo-choo training. He gets incredibly hyped about hiking up 700 vertical feet on Kelly Knob in 30 minutes. He calls it choo-choo training, just locking into a steady, rhythmic, locomotive breathing pattern and conquering the incline.
That rhythmic breathing is actually a critical cardiovascular adaptation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he is learning to match his oxygen intake to his muscular output, finding a sustainable threshold where he doesn't spike his heart rate into the anaerobic zone. It's a sure sign that his body is finally adapting to the trauma.
He even finds a strange thrill in the logistical nightmare of a wet tent. I mean, most people would look at a soaking wet rainfly at 5:00 a.m. and just want to cry.
It's the worst way to wake up.
But Gutsy takes immense pride in mastering the disassembly process. He figures out the precise order of operations to remove the wet rainfly from the inner tent, packing it in a way that keeps the moisture completely isolated from his down sleeping bag and dry clothes inside his backpack.
That might sound like a trivial detail to some, but in the backcountry, mastering that specific sequence is a difference between mild discomfort and potentially fatal hypothermia.
Because down loses its heat, right?
Exactly. A wet down sleeping bag loses all of its insulative properties. By mastering the wet tent disassembly, Gutsy's exerting competence and control over an environment that previously made him feel helpless. The dopamine hit he gets from that small victory is what propels him forward.
And because he is finally present, he opens himself up to moments of pure wonder. There is an entry where he is cruising through the woods, he's got his headphones in, listening to the Rest is History podcast, and he has his very first bear sighting.
A moment that usually triggers extreme anxiety in novice hikers.
Exactly, but because of his mental shift, it's not a terrifying encounter, it's just a cute little bear cub running through the forest, completely unbothered by him.
That's amazing.
It's this incredibly serene alignment of modern audio entertainment and raw, wild nature. He is finally existing in the moment rather than dreading the next mile.
If we extrapolate Gutsy's mental reset to your daily life as a listener, the parallels are striking. Think about the mechanics of modern burnout.
We burn out all the time.
Right, but how often are we burning ourselves out, not because the work itself is unbearable, but simply because we are comparing our pace to our peers? We look at the promotion someone else got or the house they bought, and we feel like we are failing.
So true.
Gutsy's universal survival tactic is to decide that the metric for success is solely internal momentum. He writes, "As long as I am moving forward, I am doing my job." Stripping away comparative metrics is often the only way to survive a long-term endeavor, whether that is a 2,200-mile hike, raising a family, or navigating a multi-year career path.
Just keep moving forward. But here's the reality of the Appalachian Trail. You cannot survive the psychological marathon entirely in isolation. Even with a perfectly calibrated mindset, the sheer weight of the solitude will eventually crush you.
Humans are social creatures, even in the woods.
We are. To survive, you need a community. And on the trail, this community forms into a very specific sociological phenomenon known as a tramily, a trail family.
The formation of a tramily is a study in accelerated human bonding. In normal society, building deep trust and intimacy takes months, if not years.
Yeah, you have to do the small talk and the coffee dates.
Exactly. On the trail, because the pretenses of society are entirely absent and because everyone is subjected to the exact same environmental suffering, you bypass all the superficial layers of social interaction. You are sharing food, you are filtering water from the same muddy streams, and you are literally smelling each other at your absolute worst.
You see everything. And the source material reads like a massive ensemble cast of a fantasy novel because of all the trail names. To understand how Gutsy survived, we really have to look at his core tramily, the constants in his daily life.
The anchors.
Right. And the most prominent constants early on are two hikers known collectively as the Dilly-Dallies, or the Girl.
Maya, whose trail name is Bumblebee, and Lizzie, who goes by Skittles.
Bumblebee and Skittles. They were Gutsy's constant companions for nearly a month, from April 6 to May 2. And the dynamic here is fascinating because of the inherent physiological differences.
It's quite a contrast.
It really is. Gutsy is a 61-year-old man recovering from a foot injury, focused on a steady, unbroken rhythm. The girls are significantly younger and capable of moving much faster.
An incredibly difficult rhythm to synchronize. It's like trying to sync a steady metronome with a chaotic jazz drum solo.
That is a perfect analogy.
Gutsy is the metronome. He needs to keep a steady, unbreakable 2-mile-per-hour rhythm to protect his joints and manage his energy over the long term. The girls are the jazz solo. They are capable of bursts of chaotic 4-mile-per-hour sprinting, followed by 3-hour naps in the sun.
But the emotional currency of the trail supersedes the physical pacing. There is a deeply touching moment in the journal where the girls, along with another hiker named Smiles, actually sit Gutsy down.
They stage an intervention.
Basically, they intentionally ask him to slow his pace, to disrupt his metronome, so they can all stay together as a unit. Gutsy is completely surprised and deeply moved by this. They are literally sacrificing their own physical efficiency for the sake of his companionship.
It speaks to the intense psychological reliance hikers develop on each other. The comfort of a familiar face at the shelter at the end of the day is worth walking a little slower. However, we must also track the physiological evolution of the Dilly-Dallies, because they do not remain the jazz solo forever.
Oh man, no they don't.
The trail alters their biology and their psychology over time.
The transformation is wild. Fast forward to the end of the journal, when they reach the White Mountains in New Hampshire. This is some of the most brutal, rugged terrain on the entire East Coast.
Oh, absolutely punishing.
We are talking about navigating massive boulder fields, climbing rebar ladders bolted into sheer rock faces, and dealing with unpredictable, violent alpine weather above treeline.
The White Mountains do not allow for dilly-dallying.
Huh. Exactly. And the girls have a hard deadline. They need to finish the trail before a scheduled July vacation, so they undergo this massive shift and enter what Gutsy respectfully dubs full beast mode.
I love that.
These are the same girls who asked Gutsy to slow down in Virginia. Now, they hike from Lakes of the Clouds Hut to Carter Notch Hut in a single day.
Let's unpack the topography of that specific section. That is 21.6 miles that involves summiting Mount Washington, navigating the jagged peaks of the Presidential Range, dropping down into Pinkham Notch, and then immediately scaling the impossibly steep, grueling ascent of the Wildcat Mountains.
Sounds exhausting just hearing it.
Doing that in a single 12-hour day is elite ultra-runner territory.
It perfectly illustrates how the trail physically hardens people. The hikers you meet in Georgia, nursing blisters and struggling with blowdowns, are fundamentally different biological machines by the time they reach New England.
They've completely adapted.
Yeah, they have shed fat, their muscle density has completely adapted to constant climbing, and their pain tolerance has just skyrocketed.
But that physical hardening is not a guarantee of invulnerability. Which brings us to another core member of the early tramily, a hiker in his mid-30s. He goes by several variations of the same name.
Right. Kaleidoscope, K-Scope, K, or Chris Flo.
Yes. And Chris Flo's storyline forces us to confront the most terrifying ghost that haunts every thru hiker, the trail-ending injury.
The nightmare scenario.
You can do everything right. You can have the mental fortitude, the perfect gear, the optimal nutrition. But sometimes your biomechanics simply betray you. Gutsy notes that K-Scope begins experiencing severe pain in his shin.
Yeah, Gutsy writes down the grim diagnosis. It's likely severe shin splints, or worse, a stress fracture. And a stress fracture is a death sentence for a through hike.
Let's look at the underlying mechanism of a stress fracture. It is a failure of bone remodeling. When you subject the tibia to constant repetitive impact under heavy load, the bone sustains microtraumas.
Which is normally fine, right?
Normally, yes, the body repairs these microtraumas, making the bone stronger. But on a through hike, the rate of impact far exceeds the body's ability to repair the bone. The microtraumas compound until the bone literally begins to crack under the strain. The only cure is complete non-weight-bearing rest.
And Gutsy points out the terrifying logistics of that rest. A stress fracture requires at least 6 weeks of healing. On a through hike, you're constantly racing against the seasons.
The weather window is tight.
Exactly. You have a specific weather window before the snow flies in Maine, and they literally close the final mountain, Mount Katahdin. A 6-week pause means you lose your weather window. Your season is over. Your dream is dead.
And how Gutsy processes K-Scope's departure is a masterclass in the psychology of extreme environments. They walk together to a trailhead where K-Scope will leave the woods to seek medical attention. And Gutsy describes the parting as a slightly awkward goodbye, just a distant wave.
When I first read that, I was shocked. I mean, you spend weeks living intensely with this person, sharing your deepest fears, forming this incredibly tight, tramily bond, and when their dream collapses, you just give them an awkward, distant wave.
It seems harsh.
It feels incredibly cold.
It feels cold to someone observing from the comfort of a living room, but on the trail, it is a vital psychological defense mechanism. I call this concept empathetic rationing.
Empathetic rationing.
Yes. On the Appalachian Trail, the attrition rate is roughly 75%. Most people who start will not finish. If you fully open your heart to process the grief, the disappointment, and the tragedy of every single friend whose hike ends prematurely, you will exhaust your emotional reserves.
Oh, wow.
Empathy in a survival situation is a finite resource, just like the calories in your backpack.
That makes perfect sense. If you spend all your emotional fuel mourning a stranger's stress fracture in Virginia, you won't have the mental resilience required to survive the freezing rain in New Hampshire.
Precisely. Hikers learn to compartmentalize departures. The awkward wave is not a lack of caring, it is a boundary. It is a way of silently communicating, I care about you and I am devastated for you, but I cannot absorb the weight of your tragedy right now because I still have 1,500 miles of suffering ahead of me and I need all my strength for myself. It is an act of pure self-preservation.
Empathetic rationing. That is a brutal but totally necessary tool. But the trail abhors a vacuum. When one companion leaves, the dynamic immediately shifts to accommodate someone new. The very day Gutsy loses K-Scope, right around May 2nd, he bonds with a new hiker named K2.
And K2 becomes the new concept.
He does, and the dynamic with K2 serves a very different psychological purpose for Gutsy. Where the dilly-dallies provided a synchronized family unit, K2 provides levity.
Just pure banter.
Total banter. Gutsy writes that K2 gets my teasing and returns the favor. You can just picture these two guys, exhausted, dirty, sitting on a log, just roasting each other over their freeze-dried noodles.
It's a pressure release valve.
Yeah, exactly. There is a great memory, Gutsy Records, where they take a 0 day, which is a day where you hike 0 miles to rest and resupply in Greenwood Lake. They go to a local spot called Murphy's for dinner with another hiker, just Jim, and they just have an incredible time.
Taking a 0 day is a strategic gamble, though. It sounds like a necessary relief, but logistically it means you are burning through your financial budget and your food supplies without getting any closer to Maine.
It's expensive to not hike.
It is. However, the psychological reset of sitting in a real chair at a real table, eating a meal you didn't have to rehydrate with boiling water, is often worth the lost mileage. It reminds the hiker that civilization still exists.
But the transient nature of the trail always strikes back. K2 eventually has to leave the trail near the New York and Connecticut border. He has to go into New York City to pick up his wife, who is flying in from New Zealand for a month-long visit.
A different kind of departure.
Right. And this parting hits Gutsy differently than K-Scope's departure. Gutsy explicitly admits in the journal, I was sad today about losing K2.
Because K2 isn't leaving due to a tragic injury, he's leaving for a joyous reunion. The empathetic rationing doesn't need to be deployed as heavily.
That makes sense.
But it still highlights the vulnerability of the thru-hiker. Despite all the defense mechanisms, the crushing isolation can suddenly creep back in the moment. A constant companion vanishes back into the real world.
So you have these constants, the tramway members who anchor your daily life. But arguably the most fascinating aspect of the Appalachian Trail is the passing ships. Beyond the constants, the trail is defined by a bizarre, fleeting parade of strangers.
You see everyone out there.
You share this extreme, weird intimacy with people for maybe 12 hours at a shelter, and then you never see them again. And the cast of characters' gutsy encounters highlights how the trail acts as a massive sociological equalizer.
You see this most clearly in the extremes of pacing. The trail forces everyone, regardless of their athletic philosophy, to coexist in the same narrow corridor of dirt.
On one extreme, you have the sprinters. Gutsy introduces us to his buddy Tom early on. It is only day 4 of the entire hike. Their bodies have absolutely not adapted to the weight of the packs yet, and Tom decides he is going to hike 27 miles in a single day.
On day 4.
Day 4. He maintains a pace of nearly 3 miles per hour, and that includes the time he takes for breaks.
From a physiological standpoint, maintaining 3 miles per hour over mountainous terrain with a loaded pack on day 4 is borderline reckless.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. The sheer impact force on the unconditioned knees and ankles is staggering. Tom is pushing the absolute limits of his cardiovascular and musculoskeletal systems.
And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the strollers. Gutsy runs into 2 section hikers going by the names Uke and Suge. And yes, Uke is named that because he literally carries a ukulele strapped to his backpack.
Now, the extra weight of a musical instrument is a profound statement of priorities.
Completely. Gutsy describes Uke and Suge as, quote, very relaxed. They are not worried about 27-mile days. They are striving for 5-mile days.
5 miles a day.
Think about that contrast. Tom is redlining his heart rate to crush 27 miles, while Uke is ambling along for 5 miles, probably stopping to strum chords next to a scenic waterfall.
Consider the implications of that coexistence. In the corporate world, or in regular society, the high-performing sprinter obsessed with maximum output rarely interacts with the relaxed stroller who prioritizes leisure.
Never.
They exist in entirely different socioeconomic, professional, or social spheres. They don't go to the same restaurants, they don't live in the same neighborhoods. But on the Appalachian Trail, the environment strips away all of that societal hierarchy.
The sun sets at the exact same time for Tom and for Uke.
It's exactly. When a thunderstorm rolls in, Tom's superhuman VO2 max doesn't keep him dry, and Uke's ukulele doesn't build a roof.
They both end up wet.
They both end up scurrying into the exact same 3-sided wooden shelter. They both have to filter their drinking water from the same muddy puddle. They sit shoulder to shoulder, boiling water on their tiny stoves, treating each other with absolute equality because the trail demands it. The woods do not care about your pace. They only care about your presence.
And speaking of presence, the trail is populated by people who, by all normal societal logic, shouldn't be there at all, the veterans and the survivors. These encounters completely shatter any preconceived notions of what an endurance athlete looks like.
Oh, for sure.
Gutsy is at Thunder Hill Shelter, and he meets a guy named The Raven. His real name is John. He's from Pennsylvania, and he is 74 years old.
And we must emphasize the logistics of The Raven setup. He's carrying a 42-pound backpack.
42 pounds. Let's talk about the physics of that.
A 42-pound pack is incredibly heavy by modern standards, where ultralight hikers are pushing base weights under 10 pounds. Putting 42 pounds on a 74-year-old spine alters the center of gravity, drastically increases the load on the lumbar vertebrae, and requires immense core strength just to maintain balance on uneven terrain.
And he's not just surviving. He's knocking out consistent 10-mile days. But here's the detail that truly reframes everything. The Raven is a throat cancer survivor.
Wow.
Yeah. He is out there completing the entire 2,200-mile trail in 3 LSHs.
The LS stands for a long-ass section hike. Instead of trying to do the entire trail in one continuous 6-month push, which might be biologically impossible for a 74-year-old body recovering from cancer treatments, he strategically breaks the trail into 3 massive, multi-month chunks over 3 years. It is a brilliant logistical adaptation to his physical reality.
I just want you, the listener, to pause and visualize this. You have younger, able-bodied hikers complaining about a sore knee or a damp sleeping bag. And then a 74-year-old cancer survivor carrying 42 pounds of gear walks past you in the freezing rain with a smile on his face.
It annihilates your right to complain.
It's an instant, massive perspective shift. What drives a person to do that?
It is the absolute refusal to surrender agency to biology. The disease tried to dictate the terms of his life. And carrying 42 pounds over a mountain is his way of reclaiming the pen and writing his own terms.
He's not the only one demonstrating that sheer, unadulterated stubbornness. Gutsy runs into a fascinating array of logistical rule breakers. He meets Sofa King, who is a Esobo section hiker for life. He actually has a connection to Gutsy's hometown, casually mentioning he used to work at a restaurant called The Cellar back in Blacksburg.
The SOB, or Southbound Road, is a fascinating psychological choice. Instead of starting in Georgia and walking north with the massive bubble of hikers, Esobe starts at Mount Katahdin in Maine, the hardest, most rugged, most isolated part of the entire trail, and walks south.
You start with the hardest part.
You are choosing to face the ultimate boss fight on day one.
Then you have Two-Timer, who is a flip-flopper.
The flip-flop is another strategic logistical maneuver. If you start in the middle, hike north, and then return to the middle to hike south, you can dodge the worst of the summer heat in the mid-Atlantic, avoid the massive crowds in Georgia, and effectively chase the optimal weather windows.
It sounds super complicated.
It requires complex travel logistics, but Two-Timer is doing it on his second through-hike attempt, after his first attempt was completely derailed by a foot surgery.
And then you have Blade Runner and Yogi, who are out there finishing a hike that was literally disrupted by a hurricane the year prior. A hurricane washed out their dream, and they just came back the next year to pick up where they left off.
These individuals are testaments to the human refusal to leave a task unfinished. They face physical interventions of disease, surgical trauma, or literal acts of God like a hurricane, and they simply recalculate the route. They do not accept no from the universe.
And that stoicism isn't just an American trait. Gutsy runs into the international crowd, specifically a 62-year-old hiker from the UK named Dude. Suddenly, you have Gutsy at 61, Dude at 62, and just Jim at 63, forming this spontaneous pop-up trio of 60-somethings.
And what unites them isn't just their age demographic, it's a shared, seasoned perspective on suffering. Dude, coming from the UK, is struggling immensely with the terrible quality of the trail infrastructure in certain sections, a complaint Gutsy shares.
Mud and rocks.
Right. But instead of spiraling into depression over the mud and the rocks, they bond over it. Dude keeps their spirits high with incredibly funny stories.
It's the ultimate grumpy old men club. But instead of sitting on a porch complaining about the neighborhood, they are actively scaling mountains. They possess the emotional maturity to laugh at the absolute absurdity of their situation, because the situation is absurd.
It's completely ridiculous.
They are dirty, they are in pain, they are eating garbage food, and they are doing it for fun. And every single step they take, every blister they tape up, every eccentric character they meet is pulling them inexorably toward one geographical point, the finish line, Mount Katahdin in Maine.
The climax of the journey. The physical and psychological compression of the final miles is a phenomenon unique to long-distance trails.
As Gutsy nears the end of his 2,200-mile odyssey, the journal takes on an almost supernatural tone. He starts experiencing what feels like ghosts on the trail.
We need to look at the mechanism of shelter logbooks to understand this. At every shelter along the AT, there is a notebook where hikers leave messages, update their status, or just sign their trail name.
Like a physical message board.
Right, and for months, Gutsy has been reading these books.
And suddenly, in Maine, he begins to see the names of hikers in these logbooks who passed him months ago. People like Checkbook, Silly and Rooster, KT and Booze, Commando. These were the fast hikers. They blew past him back in Virginia or Pennsylvania.
He probably thought he'd never see them again.
He assumed they were long gone, hundreds of miles ahead, already back in their normal lives. But now he sees their names right in front of him. They're hovering right at the finish line, either just finishing or waiting to summit.
I call this the centrifuge effect. For 2,000 miles, the trail acts like a centrifuge, spinning wildly, separating the fast from the slow, the injured from the healthy, spreading the community out over 14 states.
Right.
But Mount Katahdin acts as a massive funnel.
It squeezes everyone back together.
Exactly.
Right.
The geography literally compresses the surviving community into a single, highly dense point. The people he thought were gone forever are suddenly materialized in the same physical space.
You see this physical compression at the final camp, the Birch's Shelter in Baxter State Park. It's the night before the summit. The sheer density of trail names gathered in one spot is staggering. You have Legend, Lion, Ranger Pete, Smiles, 35, Mantis, Flatlander. Even K-Scope Kaleidoscope made it back.
The reunion of the Tramley. It's a gathering of the ultimate survivors. But even at the very end, standing at the base of the final mountain, the trail demands respect. And the proximity of the finish line can cause the brain to make incredibly dangerous irrational choices.
Which brings us to a hiker named Iceman. Gutsy makes a very specific observation about Iceman at the Birches. He writes that Iceman decides he is going to hike the Katahdin summit that exact same day, despite looking, quote, super sick with a green face and hollow eyes.
This is a textbook example of a dangerous neurological phenomenon known in mountaineering as summit fever.
I'm looking at this note about Iceman hiking with a green face, and honestly, it just sounds reckless. At what point does this celebrated endurance cross the line into actual dangerous delusion?
It crosses the line when the sunk cost fallacy hijacks the amygdala. Iceman has walked over 2,100 miles. He has invested half a year of his life, immense physical suffering, and massive financial resources into this singular goal.
He's so close.
The final mountain is right in front of him. The dopamine anticipation of the finish line completely suppresses the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational decision-making and risk assessment.
So his brain is literally ignoring the fact that his body is failing.
Exactly. The body's critical warning systems, the nausea, the hollow eyes, the extreme fatigue, are screaming stop, but the psychological gravity of the summit overrides those signals. He is visibly ill, but the intoxicating pull of the finish line is vastly stronger than his basic instinct for self-preservation. Summit fever kills people on Everest, and it causes severe injuries on Katahdin.
It's terrifying how the mind can weaponize a goal against the body. But thankfully, Gutsy isn't relying on the dangerous dopamine hit of summit fever to get him up the mountain. He has a much safer, vastly more powerful external support system waiting for him.
Corinne.
His wife, Karen, is there, and I absolutely love this detail. She becomes so integrated into the final moments of the journey that she earns her very own trail name. The Tramley dubs her Buttons.
And the psychology behind the origin of that name is incredibly profound. It speaks to how humans require physical, tangible totems of affection when placed in deprivation environments.
She made him these physical buttons to carry on his pack. One button simply said, "Poor baby," which she made for him to look at when he was utterly miserable, like when he was picking melted Leuco tape out of his raw heels.
We all need a poor baby sometimes.
We really do. And the other button said, "You are amazing," designed to comfort and motivate him during the impossible climbs, like the choo-choo training up Kelly Knob.
In an environment where you are stripped of all your normal emotional support structures, no hugs, no comfortable living room, no easy conversations, a physical token like a button serves as an emotional anchor. It is a tangible piece of the safety he left behind, proving that his identity outside of being Gutsy still exists and is waiting for him.
It perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of the trail, the extreme lows requiring a poor baby and the triumphant highs requiring a "you are amazing." And when he finally touches the sign on the summit of Mount Katahdin, the ensuing celebration is beautifully, hilariously primal.
Oh, that's great.
They don't go to a 5-star restaurant. They don't pop an expensive bottle of champagne. The surviving Gain Karen, Flatlander, Chips, Legends, Smiles, Mantis, and Gutsy, they just hang out by the Able Camp store the next morning waiting for the doors to open. And when it does, they absolutely gorge themselves.
The metabolic release of the finish line.
Yes. Gutsy lists it out. Sandwiches, sugary drinks, chocolate, cake, chips, just massive, unhinged amounts of garbage calories.
We have to look at the physiology of that gorge fest. For 6 months, Gutsy's body has existed in a state of severe, chronic caloric deficit. He's been burning far more calories than he can possibly carry and consume. His glycogen stores have been constantly depleted, but more importantly, his brain has been in a state of constant low-level survival rationing. Every calorie was calculated.
So eating a gas station cake is actually a profound biological signal.
Precisely. Eating massive amounts of junk food at a camp store without worrying about rationing or weight is the biological signal to the nervous system that the war is officially over. The threat has passed. The body can finally exit survival mode and begin the long process of rebuilding.
He achieved exactly what he set out to do in his pre-trail matrix. He survived the 180 days. He didn't activate the dabbling clause and quit. He definitively, physically proved to himself that he is not succumbing to the fear of aging. He beat the biological clock that terrified him back in January.
You really did.
So what is the core takeaway for you, the listener? We've just conceptually walked 2,200 miles with Gregor Woolman. But you don't need to quit your job, buy a 40-pound backpack, and walk to Maine to apply the mechanics of this journal to your own life.
We all navigate our own versions of the Appalachian Trail. The mechanics of endurance are universal.
Exactly. Maybe you are dealing with a metaphorical wet tent at work right now. You are stuck in a project that is miserable, chaotic, and seemingly impossible to manage. The lesson isn't to complain about the rain. The lesson is to focus on the micrologistics. Figure out how to pack the wet rain fly without soaking your sleeping bag. Master the small, uncomfortable task in front of you.
Or perhaps you feel like you are constantly falling behind the dilly-dallies in your career or your personal life. You watch peers enter full beast mode, achieving milestones at a rapid pace, while you feel stuck moving at a snail's pace, nursing your own metaphorical injuries.
That is where you have to deploy the concept of the timeless existence. The moment you compare your metronome to their jazz solo, you break your own rhythm. The core insight Gutsy learned is that the key to surviving the murky, muddy waters of our long-term goals is to stop looking at the clock and stop looking at the person running next to you.
Focus on the gentle blowdowns.
If you are moving forward, no matter how slowly, you are doing your job.
And that leaves us with a fascinating final paradox to consider. Gutsy started this incredible hike because he was terrified of time. He wanted to prove his biological clock hadn't run out. He was running against the calendar. But by the end of the journey, he realized the trail actually exists entirely outside of time. It demands absolute presence over speed.
Presence over speed, I love that.
So think about your own life right now. If you were forced to strip away your clocks, your calendars, and your relentless comparisons to the people around you, who would your trail name be? And what would that unburdened version of you finally give yourself permission to do?
Who is your inner Gutsy waiting to be unleashed? Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Until next time, find your rhythm and keep moving forward.